Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. Just wanted to kind of bring an update about what's going on with the channel. I've been kind of burnt out. I've done 145 videos and had five of them taken down out of the 145, and it's getting the information, putting everything together. It kind of takes a toll on you after a bit. I mean, with knowledge comes trouble. There's troubles. That the Bible talks about it. The more that you know, the more trouble there is with it. The more burden it is. And but not only that, just here where we're at, and I see people's comments like on YouTube and stuff talking about it, about this weather modification stuff. I mean, here I would say that in the last 2 months we've probably not had more than 5 or 6 days of sunshine. I mean, it's been cloudy and rainy pretty much the whole time. And after a while, it starts getting to you. I don't know if you're familiar with the cabin fever, but people who live in places like Alaska and in northern regions of the world where they don't get a whole lot of sunshine, majority of the year, they have to have these what they call satellites, seasonal. I can't remember what the SAD stands for, but it's where you're not getting enough sunlight, infrared. And one of the things I talked about in the previous videos, I talked about how the sun has changed as far as the output of it. It used to be more yellow, more reddish yellow. Now it's bluish white. And I'm of the belief that it's from where they're pumping all this stuff in the air, all these the stratospheric aerosol injection, solar radiation management, or whatever you want to call it. They're doing this stuff, and it's altering the frequency of light that we're seeing down here on the surface of the earth, and it affects your mental state. It causes depression and all kinds of things, because behind our eyes, I think it's not the pituitary gland, hypothalamus or something, but there's a gland behind our eyes that the infrared radiation goes through our eye and hits that gland, and it stimulates it to produce, I guess, melatonin or what's the other one? Dopamine or something like that stimulates our mood. And I've just been blah, man. And so I've even been looking to get one of these lights to see if it'll help. It's a SAD light that it's got the light tuned to the optimum frequency, and I've been thinking about maybe getting one of them just for that purpose. I mean, maybe spend 15 minutes a day, a couple times a day, getting that light, because I could go out in the sun whenever was getting normal sun, and I could just close my eyes and put my face up to the sun, and I mean, it was almost like I could feel bad, like my battery's recharging or something. I mean, it may sound crazy, but it's not. And I grew up down south, and so we got lots of sunshine. The closer you get to the equator, the more you get. And so we got, an abundance of it, and I was out in it all the time when I was growing up. We kids, we wanted to be outside, and not like today where they want to sit there with a phone or watching a TV or something all day long. No, it was more like, we're going to get a whipping if we don't come on in, is the way it was. And we walked everywhere, we went, and the other thing was too, was when we was kids, we went and hunted bottles. because back then you had a deposit on a drink bottle. So we would go and find drink bottles, and save them up and get it until we got enough to make it worth our while to take them and cash them in. And you get a couple of bucks or something, but back then a couple of bucks was actually, had some value to it. I was telling somebody in our store the other day, now a little candy bar about like that's $1.89. $1.89. And when I was a kid, you could get a candy bar about that big, and it was 10 cents. Because to show you how much value the dollar has lost as far as purchasing power. And but anyway, I kind of got off there what I was talking about. But growing up out in the sun, we kids, we just romped and played, and a lot of energy, and I think it has to do with the sun. And you got all these states now. Let's see, Tennessee's done it. I think Mississippi, Florida's bringing it up for a vote. I think they're going to pass it, blocking, or banning the chemtrailing or whatever. But it's, you got to call it what it really is: stratospheric aerosol injection. And they had a representative from one of these companies that does this stuff. And he's like, we're just cloud seeding, generating rain and that kind of stuff. But really, they're doing way more than that. I mean, I've seen countless amount of footage of these planes. Some of them, it looked just like a big. We had one here that they somebody showed it on YouTube. It was, it just looked like a meteor or something coming down, but it was actually a plane. And on the wings of the plane, they have these like almost like flares is what they look like, but they ignite them and they're burning something. I don't know what they're burning, but they're burning it, and it's and they get up real high and they start coming down like this, like in a dive, and it's just black looking smoke rolling off of this thing. And I've seen it several different times, but this was here in West Virginia where that was at, and it was one of the first ones I ever seen of this. And now people are seeing them more and more, and I don't know what they're pumping in the air, but they're pumping something nasty in there. And and they're talking about with this solar radiation management or blocking the sunlight, using sulfur dioxide, because they realize that whenever volcanoes erupt, they kick out a lot of this sulfur dioxide, and it dims out the sun, and of course you can have cooling occur when that happens. And they say that's what they're doing. They're trying to cool it down because of global warming, but they've been saying that for the last 50 years, and they've been doing this stuff. They're trying to act like they just now starting to do this stuff, but they're not. They've been doing this weather modification stuff for well over 50 years. And the beginnings of it actually go all the way back to the 1930s when they first started experimenting, trying different things. And it was the military, it was the U.S. Army Weather Bureau that was doing it. And of course, I've talked about this before, where Lyndon Johnson in 1969, I think he was he was at some kind of a summit, or either it might even been the State of the Union address to Congress, where he talked about owning the weather by 2025. And whoever owned the weather, controlled the weather, controlled the world. And so, and if you look, it's funny how the Midwestern part of the United States has really been heavily attacked using this weather stuff. And you can actually see these NORAD, or not NORAD, they're it's a type of radar that the weather people supposedly use. It's not just Doppler, but it's another type that they use. And you can see this stuff pulsing, from satellite images. You can see it pulsing energy into these storms, and these storms increasing in intensity, and then they can actually shift them move them around from one, if they wanted to go into this direction over here and they want to hit this town or whatever. And I really believe it's a part of the agenda to move people to try to force people out of these regions into these 15-minute cities that they keep talking about, where you live, work, and play right there everything's within 15 minutes of where you live. And part of it too was the Green New Deal with electric cars, is that with electric cars, they're limited on how far you can go. Even though they're putting more and more of them charging stations around and stuff, you still have to plan your route where you're going. I mean, if you wanted to go over, from here to California, you would have to plan your route meticulously based on, the kind of mileage that you get in that electric car, that you're going to be able to hit one of these charging stations before you run out of charge. And so it limits, most people ain't going to do that. Now, the majority of people, though, will get in an ICE, an internal combustion engine car, and no problem, jump in it and take off, because they know there's going to be a gas station, every couple of miles, pretty much, especially along the interstates. So you don't have to worry about it. And then all of that, if you do run out, you can just walk to a gas station, you get a gas jug full of gas, take it back, put it in your car, but you can't do that with a charger. You can't. You're gonna have to call a tow truck, and they're gonna have to come pick you up and take you to where a charging station is. That's why they had the emphasis on this, and of course with Trump, he's throwed a big monkey wrench in all this stuff, and that's why they're screaming and hollering. I mean, about all of it, and now the tariffs and stuff. But and I don't really like turning this into like a political thing, but all these things do affect us, whether we like it or not. Even if we're in the world as believers, we're in the world, but we're not of the world. In other words, we don't take part in the things that they take part in. But we're still affected by what happens in the world, and we can't get around that. I mean, if you look back at the time of Yahushua, when he was here, obviously, most of his address was to the people of Israel. The people that had been raised up by Yahuwah to be his people. But they had, as always, I mean, when you going all the way back to the time of the judges, they had rebelled, become stiff-necked, turned, and started doing their own thing. There at the end, the last chapter of Judges, it says, every man done that which was right in his own eyes. And of course, we kind of see the same thing happening now with people. But the difference is that in the time that Yahushua was here, whenever he was taken before Pilate, and he told Pilate, he says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it was, then my people would fight you. But I'm not, my kingdom's not here. It ain't came yet. But it did come right after that, because he told his Talmudim that, that no stone in that temple, this Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, Luke 21, taught, whenever they come out of the temple, the last time he went in there, he came out and they went on the Mount of Olives, and they said, see all these, look at how magnificent, the stonework is in this building and all that stuff, and all these buildings and everything, and how great it is. And he said, yeah, and I tell you that not one stone will be left standing. And they said, well, tell us, when is the sign of your coming and the end of the age? That was 70 AD. That's when, that was the end of the age, the end of that age of the Hebrews. And that system of worship, it ceased in 70 AD. And he returned. Because, I mean, if you think about what he told John, I mean, because you got all these people, oh, John's still alive. It's, 2,000 years later. No, that's not what he meant. He was talking about then. He told them people, he says, what is it to you if John is alive at my return? And some of them were. John was one of them. And this is the thing about it is that, and I never really thought about it. But now, I began to think about it here, within the last year or so. I started thinking about it. I've been convinced that Revelation was written in the 90s AD. But the thing I always kept having going through my mind, and again, it comes from that dispensational teaching. Sometimes that stuff's hard to get, when you've been taught this all your life, it's hard to get rid of it. Part of it is that, well, if it was written after 70 AD, why is there no mention of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem? In any of them. In any of the books after the time of that Yahushua was here, after his crucifixion and resurrection and ascension, why was there no mention of it? Why was the first mention of it that we have was in the War of the Jews, Flavius Josephus and Tacitus, the Roman historian? And why is it that both of those books were not found until supposedly the 10th century? In other words, toward the end or at the end of the millennial kingdom. So, and I began to reread it and look at it from a different mindset. Because again, it's programming, folks. And Satan understands this. He knows this, that if you can program, because the scripture tells us this, it says, train up a child in the way that it should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. So, if you look at that from the, that you've got to have your thinking reprogrammed. If you're programmed early on in a certain way of believing, it's hard to come out of it. You still see things from that programming. So I've been being reprogrammed, but it's a process. I mean, it doesn't just happen overnight, but the more I began to question it, why didn't we? And now finding out about the time, that there's been time added to the calendar, to the years, and then looking at again all these ancient structures that we're told. I mean, what's really amazing is that they'll show you like the Empire State Building, for example. And they said they built it in 1 year. Actually, not even a year. And any comparable building to that, built today, takes 4 or 5 years. Or longer. I mean, when you begin to look into the narrative part of it, and who built it, and then these Photoshop pictures that they have, and they don't really show you actually anybody building any of this stuff. They just show you these little clips here and there, and that are photoshopped, and they've proved that these pictures were photoshopped. We think that's a modern technology or process, but they had it back then. even earlier. And we know that photography, as we've been told, began in 1816. So, and actually all these technologies already existed. Nothing new under the sun. It already existed. They just meted out. They kind of just, the controllers, the ones that, are in league with Hasatan, that he gave power to, or authority to work with him to manipulate everything, to create false narratives, and just so many things now that I never, like I say, I have questioned about these buildings, but not in the sense of that they were out of place necessarily, out of time, but that what happened to the ability to do that kind of craftsmanship, that kind of, just mind-blowing stuff, what happened to it. And it's the same with this weather modification stuff. I mean, it's technology that's probably been used in the past, in one form or another, and whenever you have a reset like you had there at 70 AD, when the world power, and it even tells you in there, like during the time whenever Yahushua was a young man, and they had to go to where they lived at and be counted. Caesar Augustus took a worldwide census, and all the Roman citizens were marked. And you couldn't buy or sell if you didn't have that mark. I mean, that's, so that period of time, that end of the age, because he said that whenever he was telling them about what was going to happen to these buildings, he said, well, tell us, when is this going to happen? When is this end of the age? And it ain't talking about now. Because he was saying, when those buildings were destroyed, that was the end of the age. That was the Great Tribulation. And, of course, again, being in the dispensational belief, because why did they not ever talk about that? Why does it, because I never heard nothing about that growing up, going to church and all that stuff. I never heard about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem or any of that stuff. I mean, I've heard about it since I've been grown, but it was sort of like an afterthought, But now, when I began to go back and reread these scriptures in Matthew and Mark and Luke and other scriptures, in Corinthians and 2 Timothy and 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy and the epistles and of John and Revelation, and reread it with the without that dispensational programming, then I can begin to see that is really what happened. But these people, this is the religion. And as I've said before, this here is not a religion, folks. It's a way of life. It's a way of living. It has nothing to do with religion. Religion is a man-made construct. And all these religions, I believe, were all created pretty much at the same time. And they were just based off of religions that had existed throughout the past. I mean, if you look at them, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Taoism, whatever they call it, Shinto or whatever, the Eastern religions, what's the other, the basically they all started. All of these false religions started over there at Babel, and but they are the same. Really, the root of them is the same. If you look at these gods, these chief gods, they're all based off of Nimrod. Nimrod, Osiris, Apollo, Osiris, Mithra. I mean, on and on. They all are talking about this same guy, this same God man, and his son Tammuz. I mean, when you see these Catholics with the black cross X or whatever on their forehead, it's weeping for Tammuz. That's what Lent is. It's the widows weeping for Tammuz. And who was Tammuz? He was the son of Nimrod and Semiramis, their son. And supposedly, whenever Nimrod was killed or died or whatever, Tammuz, she was, and it's the same story you hear about Isis and Osiris and Horus. Same story. And you see this story over and over again throughout all these cultures. And why? Because they all originated from the same place. But now, because their languages are different, but they're talking about the same events, the same entities. They're just using different names for them. And if you look on the back of a dollar bill on there, that, what is it? E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. People think that's talking about the melting pot, out of all these people, you got one country or whatever. And that may be part of it. But in reality, it's talking about this false god. Out of many different names, there's one God. This one false god. And, and I've talked about how this has been a recurring, originally, I believe, before the flood, it was Lucifer. And he was a Nephilim. He was the offspring of Hasatan, of the Satan. He was his offspring. And what leads me to believe that is what we read in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And I will put enmity between the woman and her seed and the serpent and his seed. His seed. So he had this offspring, this Lucifer, and he tried to ascend up to heaven. And he was cast back down, and he became disembodied. Like the rest of those Nephilim giants and all back then, he became disembodied. And so every so often, like after the flood, within like a couple of 100 years, you had this Nimrod character, the son of Cush, the son of Ham. You had this Nimrod guy that becomes indwelled by the spirit of Lucifer, the spirit of Antichrist. Because if the seed of the woman is Christ, then the seed of the serpent is Antichrist. I mean, it makes so much sense, and I never thought about it in that way. And in the Epistle of John, he said that the spirit of Antichrist is already at work in the world. So he indwelled in Nimrod, and what does he do? He's trying to build a tower to reach into heaven. Same thing, trying to ascend up. And the same thing happened again in the Roman Empire. They were trying to ascend up their ruler. They were They began to call themselves gods because they were indwelled by that Antichrist spirit. And when you read some of the stories or the histories about Caligula and Nero, and because what would happen is one of these, and most of the time these rulers would either assassinate, they would either be assassinated by their own entourage, their own people around them, their advisors or something, or somebody from the Senate would assassinate them, or they'd kill themselves. And they would just go out of them right into the next guy that they wanted to indwell. This spirit of Antichrist, this Lucifer. And then you had his being bound, him, and Hasatan, the dragon. They were bound, during this 1,000-year millennium, and then they are released, and now we're dealing with their deception. They're deceiving. That's, it says he's released to deceive the nations again. The nations, you don't hear no mention of Israel in there, because this Israel over here is not the Hebrews. I mean, and now there's a bunch saying that they're the tribe of Manasseh. Well, if you read the story of the dispersion of the tribes in the house of Israel that went into captivity under the Assyrians, they never came back. They got dispersed throughout the world, and they got assimilated. They didn't know who they were anymore. So how is these people going to know that they are Manasseh? And if it ended back then, if that was the end of Israel, and it becomes spiritual after that, it becomes a spiritual thing, then those, who are these people that are claiming they are the tribe of Manasseh? And how do they know that? And then you see the Statue of Liberty out here. I mean, it talks about there in Revelation, says, and Michael comes down with a big chain and lays hold of the dragon and chains him and puts him in darkness and puts a seal over him for 1,000 years. And then you see this Statue of Liberty over here in New York Harbor, and if you go and look at the depictions that they have, and it's what Bertoldi, the guy that designed it, he worked off of that image, was an image of the so-called Lucifer. Or Astarte. Because supposedly Lucifer is an androgynous being, male and female. But this Statue of Liberty out here has a cuff around its leg with a piece of broken chain. Talk about irony. So here's this idol. That's basically what it is. It's an abomination out there, and the majority of people have no idea what it represents. Now, I'm sure the Freemasons and the secret societies all know what it means, because it was gifted to the people of America by France. The Freemasons in France. And Bertoldi was a Freemason, Illuminati, whatever. And they gifted it, and the people, the Freemasons over here got the money to, I guess, ship it over here and erect it on that star fort, because that's a star fort that it's sitting on, and it's, it was already there. And so, and the more I dig into about our history here in America, the more inconsistencies I see, about the Mayflower and the Pilgrims. Because you got to remember this, folks, we can't go back and verify none of that. We can't verify any of it. And all these people in, academia, the intelligentsia and all, their religion of scientism, they say all this stuff is fact. It's absolute fact. Just like they say about evolution, it's absolute fact. Heliocentric cosmology, absolute fact. Yet nobody can get up high enough to even see the entire Earth. And when you corner people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he can't answer you. Well, maybe it's an oblique spheroid, or perhaps it's shaped like a pear. Because there's nobody ever seen the Earth in its entirety. You can't get high enough. The only one that can is sitting on the throne on top of the firmament up there, and he can look down here and see the entire Earth. Only from his position can the whole entire Earth be seen. And it's just, it's amazing, how it's took this long. I'm 62 years old. It's took me this long to come to understand this. Even though I've studied this, for 50 years of my life, maybe more. I learned to read out of it. And, of course, I didn't study it back then. My mother would read to me and tell me what the words meant and stuff like that. But she was same thing. She was taught in that same dispensational belief system. And, when I began to look at a lot of the origins of a lot of these beliefs, they originate back in the 1800s. And so I've had to basically just, throw out all of that and kind of am restarting over again. Restarting with like a clean slate. And, but I have to pray, that the Father will, help me to blank out all that stuff. Everything that I feel that I've been taught all my life was false. That it was a part of this delusion, this deception. And that we're, and that's why I believe we are coming towards the end here, because I'm not the only one that's awakened or come out of this delusion. And I think the key to coming out of it is to receive the love of the truth. No matter where it leads you. No matter how much it upsets what you have believed all your life. If you really love truth, it doesn't matter. You're going to go where the truth leads you. And that's what I've been doing. I've just been being led by truth. And I've come to find out, and sometimes it ain't easy to think, man, I believe this all, I wholeheartedly believed all this. And now I realize that I was wrong. But I don't, that's, doesn't matter. What matters is the truth. That's paramount. I mean, because otherwise you're going to be deceived and you're going to be destroyed. You know, I mean, and because that's the other thing I've learned, come to understand that, I was taught, you're going to die and you're going to go to a burning hell and you're going to burn and roast for eternity. And the scriptures nowhere says that. But I just accepted it. In fact, the scripture just says when you're dead, you're dead. You don't know nothing. But they always overlook that part. And so, because that's like having purgatory. That's a Catholic thing, is purgatory. Oh yeah, you can go down there, man, and we can preach you, we can pray you out of there. Pray you into heaven. Sure. It says clearly, it is appointed unto man once to die, and thereafter the judgment. Doesn't say it's appointed unto man to die and go to hell and then the judgment. No, it doesn't say that. It just says it's appointed unto all men to die and thereafter the judgment. You're going to be raised up to judgment. And that's what's next. I mean, that's, Revelation 20. And that's when everybody will be raised up, other than those that were raised up back in the time of Yahushua when he, his second coming, the first resurrection. And that was a small group of people. Wasn't a great big huge amount of people. And so, just that small group. And the saints that had managed to make it through tribulation, that escaped, then they were caught up in the air. And again, Josephus and Tacitus both record this. I mean, these battles going on up in the sky, horses and the Messiah. So these things all happened, and then you had this millennial kingdom, because how else can you explain all these structures? And these structures, we know, I mean, there is depictions of it, of these people digging these buildings out of the earth. And I mean, even now, they're still doing it. And what we're seeing above ground, like up here in Washington, the Capitol there, I talked about this before, but the Capitol there, I guess it's been like 10 or 12 years ago, that they were digging out, and you could see there was 2 or 3 more levels of floors of building down below, with windows and all in it. Why would you build a building with an underground levels with windows? They had been above ground at some point, but they, whatever happened, the mud flood or whatever, the reset, what happened at the reset whenever Hasatan was released, we don't really know. Nobody does. That's the thing I'm trying to get across is that we can't go back and verify for fact any of it. Nothing. Nothing that's in the history books, none of it. None of that stuff is verifiable. We can't go back. So anybody that says this is an absolute fact, they're lying. I believe the only thing that we've managed to get, and I think it's by the Creator's plan, is that we've had this preserved word. And even parts of that are corrupted. Names and stuff like that. And the order of the books. Because I don't know if I mentioned it on here, but there are books in here that are not in the correct order. They just arranged them according to what they call the major prophets and the minor prophets, but there was a lot of those books, because you go read in Isaiah and it's talking about the house of Israel and what's coming to them and all that, and then you got Jeremiah and Ecclesiastes not Ecclesiastes. The book where Jeremiah's the weeping prophet and all that. You got that, and then you got Ezekiel and then Daniel, but then you got Nahum and the things that Nahum is talking about should be back here with Isaiah. They're earlier books than Ezekiel and Daniel. So, which I've got a Bible called the Hallelujah Scriptures that puts them in the correct order that they should go in. But I believe that the majority of this is correct. And that he, in order for us to have an opportunity to come to the truth, we need to have this. We need to have this word. And so he's preserved it so that we can have the opportunity to come out of the strong delusion. And that's what I think it's talking about when it talks about strong delusion. It's not talking about that time during the tribulation and the time before the millennial kingdom. It's talking about this time right here. This time that we're living in. The last days. Again, these dispensationalists try to say, oh, we're in the last days, but yet they're still expecting a tribulation and a millennial kingdom, then a release of Satan. And then that could not be the last days. The last days are the actual last days, the days before judgment and the consummation of all things. It would have to be. So I believe that strong delusion is tied to Revelation 20, where it says he is released to once again deceive the nations. And that's what we've been in. We've been in this strong delusion. And people stayed in it because they wouldn't receive the love of the truth. There's been people that did. I believe there's been people all along that have come to the knowledge of the truth. And I believe there was groups of people that came out of the millennium. And of course they had to get rid of a bunch of people. And they did. They killed a bunch. And they put a bunch in these insane asylums and took their children and put them in these orphanages, and they reprogrammed them to get the memory of that out of them. And they, of course, there was some that just said, okay, we'll go along, man, we'll keep our mouth shut or whatever. But you had some, I think, like the Puritans, that supposedly come over here on the Mayflower and all that stuff. I believe they were already here. And the Native Americans, that's why they had to try to wipe them out and to get rid of, because they some of these natives that have these stories they've had passed down to them. They said that whenever these Europeans, so-called Europeans, came over here, the ones that the controllers sent over here, the founders, and it's funny how they always use this founders, founding fathers. They found this. And these natives said, we already know all this. Talking about this here. That they already knew about it. Well, where did they know that from? The millennial kingdom. They had to. And these other Aboriginal peoples and stuff around the world that they've tried to eradicate, because a lot of them people refused to go along with the narrative. And it's probably the same like with these. I think, though, that over time, groups like the Amish and the Mennonites and the Quakers and different ones like that right there, I think they came out of the millennium too, and they just continued to practice their way of life. But over time, because of human nature and because of Hasatan's attack on people and stuff, they have their beliefs kind of began to get twisted around and stuff too. And so, and people like the Mormons and all that stuff, their stuff got all twisted and all that. And so you come to now, to the time we're in now. And I believe that, he says, in the last days, he will pour out his ruach on all flesh. And I think that's where we're at. I think in the last days, and he's pouring out his ruach. That's why you have this division going on, this happening. The left-hand path, the right-hand path, there's a divide going on there. You're going to have one's going to basically destroy the other, drive them out of, and then you're going to have this one system left. And then the people who have been truly awakened to the truth and that have the love for the truth, they're the ones that's going to end up they're going to come after true believers. But it's you got to have this shaken out where the one system becomes dominant. The world system becomes dominant and drives out all the competition, to where you only got one system. And if you look at this Christian nationalism, a type of, this Christianity, this religion that is forming. And it's not just here, it's in other countries as well. Like in Europe, you've got this divide starting over there, and and I think that a lot of it is that the reason that they want to start war with Russia over there in Ukraine, get NATO involved, get us drug into it, is to have a reset. Try and have another reset, because it's all being found out. The truth is coming out, and people are beginning to see these controllers, these puppet masters that are up here at the top of the pyramid that are pulling all the strings, but it's collapsing. The Ponzi scheme is collapsing, and every time we've had like world wars and stuff, that's exactly why we had them. They kind of want to get rid of some people, but it's more to cover up and hide what they have been doing. They can blame it on the war. They can say, the war caused the collapse in the economy and the devastation and all that. And not only that, but to hide and destroy a lot of these old world structures. Like over in Dresden, Germany over there, they just leveled that place. And it was nothing but these old world structures. You can go back and look at some of these pictures of Dresden before World War II, and it was nothing but. Same thing like you look over there in like Budapest. You got all these old world buildings there. And when you look at these structures and begin to really examine them, there's no way that these buildings were built when they said they were built, and built in the short time frame that they said they were built. Same here in America. These structures are everywhere. And when you begin to actually examine them, go look at them and see how intricately they're built and how precise, and then you look at what we build, these boxes. Yeah. In these tunnel systems all over the place, just the narrative they built around them and the short period of time that they've said that they were able to build these things, and we can't build them now. You got to question everything. And so that's why all this is coming out, and people are starting to question it all. And they got to try to scramble to have another reset. Well, their plans are being thwarted because I believe that Donald Trump was raised up for this time to expose it all. And like where Yahushua said, there's nothing that's covered that won't be uncovered, and everything spoken in the ear in secret shall be shouted from the rooftops. Well, we're seeing it. We're seeing this exposure going on of everything. I mean, it's all coming out. And I think it's so that people, can make an informed choice. You won't be able to have an excuse. And so, well, I didn't know. Yeah, well, you know. You know that this satanic system of deception in everything. I mean, it ain't just one thing like religion or the monetary system. It's in everything. Everything. The history, the religion, the banking, financial system, the technology, the populations, the timelines, everything. Everything is all a part of this deception. And in my video I done about what would you do if you were Hasatan and you were bound for 1,000 years, are you going to lay down there on your recliner and smoke cigars and drink Scotch whiskey, or are you going to be planning this all out? And that's what he did. That whole period of time, he's planning, knowing that you got to hide this past civilization, this millennial kingdom. You got to hide it. You got to explain it away. You got to add time. You got to do all this stuff. I mean, so if the millennial kingdom, came to an end in the year 1100, because the first century pretty much was, gone. I mean, after 70 A.D., we don't know that there wasn't some type of judgment there. And then the people that came out, and it talks about the judgment of Ham and Gog, because all these forces that were part of the Roman Empire. I mean, I truly believe now, that the Roman Empire was worldwide, and that they did have some kind of a marking system, and a mark in the hand or in the forehead. And of course, this is just going to be a repeated act to make people believe that we are going to go into a tribulation and all that. No, I think it's just going to be another, what we've seen in the past, that the Roman Empire and the Babel and before the flood, and it's just but this is the end of it, and the end is going to be like it was in the beginning. This time you're going to have all of this genetic stuff going on that we see happening, and their insistence on it. And a lot of this stuff too, with this bringing down these and all these conflicts and all this stuff, that is distractions. It's distractions to draw our attention away from what's really going on. The AI stuff and all. And just how much that stuff is already infiltrated. And so, this final, and a lot of people, I kind of believe it too, that this AI is sort of a way for these disembodied spirits to have the ability to control stuff. That they can control these drones, they can control robots, they can actually be like an avatar, create an avatar like a robot or something that they can actually operate in, and and not be completely disembodied anymore. and all of this stuff like the weather manipulation and all that is destroying the ability of the earth to produce food. It's so contaminating the soil. So what do? They create all of these GMO plants that can survive in soil that's contaminated with aluminum, and and can handle glyphosate to keep the insects off. And actually have them make them with the ability to produce glyphosate in the plant itself. I mean, this is just how insane it is. And it's the same that was going on back then, that they were corrupting and manipulating everything on the earth and teaching men how to do it. And so this technology and all this stuff is nothing new. It's stuff that's been going on all along. And they're just spoon feeding it out whenever these controllers decide they want to let it out. Or maybe Hasatan or one of his minions come over and say, hey, it's time to let this out. And so they let it out. And they let it out to one of their underling minions that, hey man, here's your chance to get really filthy rich. I'm going to give you this technology. Go with it. Figure it out. And so that's what they do. They get this, spoon feed it out. Same with all this weather modification stuff that they're doing. It's to weaken us. Because it says that that he seeks to weaken us. His assault on believers is to weaken us. That's why he tells us, we need to put on the whole armor of Elohim. Ephesians 6 is because this attack from every direction, and it's also from the energy that they're pumping out. All this microwaves and stuff they're pumping all over the place. And it's affecting everything. Birds, bees, whales, everything is being affected by all this energy that they're pumping out that's, messing up the natural energy that comes from the original way that Elohim created the earth to have the Schumann resonance frequency, this real low frequency that works with our own energy to make us whole, so they're attacking all of that, and of course, like I say, with this that's why I'm looking into getting unless they can get them to stop doing this cloud seeding and chemtrailing and stuff, because and anybody that can't see it, man. I mean, these people that deny it and say it's contrails, when they look out and you see this plane go by and this trail they leave behind them, and it just spreads out like this right here, and within a couple hours the sky's cloudy. I mean, anybody that thinks that's normal contrails is deluded. They're in the delusion. More and more people are coming out of it. I mean, because I think, the Father is not going to, he's going to do everything he can to get us to open up our eyes and see everything that's, all this deception. But we got to be willing to acknowledge it, and we got to be willing to want to know the truth. And the people that just aren't willing to accept it, they get further and further into the delusion, and they can't come out of it. And those people they're going to be lost. And they're going to be the ones that are going to go in there and let them make cyborgs out of them, all that stuff. And I know a lot of people that sounds crazy to them, but I mean, all you got to do is listen to these people, and they're telling you they're going to do this. They, this is their goal to do this whenever they bring this worldwide, all-controlling AI system online, Stargate or whatever. Um, then the next step, obvious step, is they want to control us. Whoever's left, because if they have their way, they're going to continue to, cull the herd, if you will, through whatever means is necessary to them. To outright just popping a cap in you. But they like to do it in a way to where they can say, "Oh, we didn't have anything to do with their death. They died of natural causes. No, man, it didn't have nothing to do with all this stuff you're pumping in the air or putting in the food or putting in the water. No, it didn't have nothing to do with that." No, and so as we've been awakened, and we understand that that's just what they're doing, that they're attacking us, and of course, again, those who are in the trapped in the matrix, if you will, they just can't see it, and it's because they are in denial. They cannot bring themselves to accept the truth. And because they can't, because they don't have a love for the truth, they'd rather live in this delusion, then that's where they're going to be trapped at. They're going to be trapped in there, and they ain't going to be able to get out. Because he's pouring out his ruach. He's talking to people's conscience, telling them, hey, don't you see this stuff? Don't you see how wrong it is? Don't you see what they're doing to you? No, I can't, no, I can't accept it. And you got all these voices all over. Me and anybody else that's, there's just more and more voices that are putting the warnings out there that are, and exposing all of this stuff. But, nobody can make you, accept it. I don't try to make people do anything. You have to come willingly on your own. It's like I said about being reprogrammed. Whenever I acknowledged that, whenever Yahushua came to me and said, stop focusing on that, focus on me. And when I began to focus on him and quit focusing so much about where we're at and, and all that, then I began to actually get the truth of it. I began to see it. I began to see, these videos just like with the flat earth. That when that started popping up in my timeline on there, and I kept saying, that's crazy, the earth is a globe, but it just kept popping up in my timeline there, and I finally just said, well, okay, I'm going to watch it, just so I can debunk it. And ended up, I got debunked. But that's okay. That's a part of coming to truth. Sometimes it's, it's not, we find out that we've been bamboozled. And, which I'm glad. I want to know. I don't want to be bamboozled. I don't want to be deceived. I want to be on that straight and narrow path. But you can believe Hasatan and his minions and the controllers are going to do everything they can to knock you off of it. And me, and I've had to just kind of regroup. And like I said, I'm looking into getting one of these things because, and they're not that much. They're like $50, something like that, $60. Hopefully I can get one. Like with my yogurt maker, I never did get my yogurt maker. I just started making it in an Instapot. And, I've been meaning to do a little clip to show y'all. I've made about 5 batches now, and by the grace of our loving Father, they've all turned out great. Actually, better than I expected. I kind of expected my first batch or whatever to maybe not turn out right, but that Instapot, that yogurt function on there, it works great. And I use pint jars. It won't hold a quart jars. It's not tall enough, but it'll hold pint jars, and I put 4 pints in there. And as a matter of fact, I got to make a batch tonight, and I still got about that much. We've been going through it. Like a quart of it in 3 or 4 days. It's gone. Becca loves it, and it's really creamy. I mean, it's just really thick and creamy. I mean, I was really blown away by just how good it turned out. And I've been using, it talks about in the, Dr. Davis, he said use a quart of ultra pasteurized half and half. But I've been using, I did the first batch, but I've been using, since then, I've been using a pint of the ultra pasteurized half and half and a pint of heavy whipping cream. And it makes it so rich. I mean, and you can eat, I'll mix fruit with it. Occasionally I'll put some fruit in it or something, but I can just sit there and eat it like it is. I mean, it's just that good. I mean, it's got a little tartness to it, but, I mean, it's really good. And I can tell a difference. I mean, I can tell a difference in the way I sleep. I've been sleeping better. And of course, I've not been eating it every day because, again, I'd have to keep the old thing going continuously. And I've got the jars together. I think I am going to have to start make a batch and then get another batch going, so that we can continue to have some to eat. And Becca and Zach like it, and they've been really eating it, and I think that they've been sleeping better. And I mean, I've been sleeping like solid. Before, I mean, I'd go to sleep and I'd sleep pretty good for a little bit, but then I'd wake up, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd always usually start praying or whatever, because I felt like that. It's just, I was, kind of being led to pray, so I'd pray. And now, I mean, I'm sleeping through the whole night, but I'm waking up kind of early, like at daylight, I wake up and that same thing. I just pray and talk to the Father, and I just feel led to. And but I think I got to get one of these lights. I wish they'd stop with it, man, and stop, putting that poison on us and all that. I pray against it. I pray against it, that somebody, will stop it. The Father will rebuke it and get rid of it. But I think it's going to come down to people, I mean, again, enough people's got to, acknowledge that it's happening, that it's real, that it's not, people's imagination, that it's not, just condensation trails. They got, and they got to say enough is enough in order to get it to stop. And, from what I understand, I tried looking it up earlier, but there's a law that Congress passed that allows them to do it. That's where it's got to stop. We got to get them to repeal that law. And because it's contaminating everything, it's killing everything. And not only does it, contaminate and kill everything, but it actually causes chemical reactions that degrade rock, asphalt, concrete. I mean, that's the reason a lot of this stuff is not holding up like it used to. Concrete and stuff, asphalt and all that stuff would hold up a lot longer. Now it's breaking up, and around here we've been just having rock slides everywhere. I mean, just not great big ones, but just little small rock slides everywhere you look. And our power yesterday was out. These trees, perfectly healthy green trees, just falling over. I mean, the whole top of them, like in the summer, the whole top of them would just be full of leaves, green, and just, I mean, I was sitting out in front of the store one summer there, talking to the old fella that lives up the road here, and just all of a sudden, here comes a tree down there, and I mean, it's fully green. I mean, the whole top of it's all green. And this happens, I was driving up the river one night, going to town. And I saw, out, like kind of out of the corner of my eye, I saw something going like that, and I thought I was like, man, I'm having a hallucination because it was doing like that, and it was a tree coming down, and I had to drive over. I mean, almost there was a hill that went off there. I mean, I got over as far as I could, and it just barely got the side of the car, and it was a perfectly green tree. I mean, it wasn't rotten or the top rotted out of it or nothing like that. No, it was a perfectly green, healthy tree that fell over. And I mean, I got up the road just a little bit, and I pulled off, and I stopped, and I called 911 and told them, that there was this tree in the road down there, so they could come down there and, put some signs out or whatever, or get it cut out of the way before somebody run into it or something. But I see these trees like that all the time. Perfectly healthy green trees that are falling over all over the place, falling over the power lines, knocking the power out and stuff. And so, but anyway, I just kind of wanted to get on here and let you know why I hadn't been on here the last 2 or 3 weeks. Just really mentally have not felt like it. And just been, I mean, not physically feeling that bad, but just no mental get up and go. I mean, I get up and do because I have to, but I just feel like I'm kind of, my mental energies just went, and I know it's got to do with not getting the sun. And because I never felt like this before, but like I say, I mean, we just hadn't been getting hardly any sunlight. And whenever we got a day that's sunny, I get out in it. I try to get out, even if I'm working in the store. When ain't nobody coming in, I just go out there and stand out in it for 15 or 20 minutes. And hoping but it's not the same as it had been. I'm not feeling that. Like, I mean, when it was the right output coming out of it, or it wasn't being blocked or whatever. I mean, I could just turn my face up like that right there, and my arms out like that, and I could feel it like just coming up through me. I mean, my whole body. And now when I'll do it, I just don't feel that. I don't feel that, and I can just feel it like coming up, like it's filling up charging up a battery or something. And I know it may sound crazy, but that's what they call cabin fever. Cabin fever is whenever you are not getting enough sunlight to produce the vitamin D3 and all. And to stimulate, you're not getting enough sunlight to stimulate these glands behind your eyes that produce these hormones or whatever, the adrenaline or whatever that perks you up, that enhances your mood and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking at one of them, and I mean, it's just one of these kind of things you just take and, you set it up in front of you. It's just a little panel like that, and you turn it on and you just close your eyes, and you put your face out there, and it just radiates that infrared, which is, and it produces the vitamin D3, and it stimulates those glands to produce those hormones or whatever that we need. But anyway, I mean, it took me a little bit of, but I had to just tell myself, you got to come, at least say something, to people that they'll be probably wondering. I mean, not that I got that many people watching me, but the ones that do, I feel like I should give them some kind of explanation as to what's happened. Why I hadn't been putting out anything. It's just not really got the mental energy right now to really do it. I mean, it takes a little effort, I mean, to kind of, dig up scriptures and, read and do a little researching and, and kind of gather my thoughts and pray about it. It takes some effort, mental effort, and again, the more you know, the more of a burden it is to you, because you realize, that especially when you begin to realize that everything you've ever been told pretty much is a lie. And so you just have to, come to terms with it and be thankful that we've been being reprogrammed and being drawn out of this delusion, this deception. And to realize that, where we really are. Not that it really matters. What matters is our relationship to Yahushua and Yahweh Elohim. That's what's most important. And then if it's stuff he wants us to understand and know, then he'll start revealing it and bringing out things that we can get a better understanding of how we've been deceived. And the more that we know, then the better we can recognize these deceptions and stay away from them. And so, as a side note, the guy, and I've been talking to him, and I hopefully I'll be able to get through to him on some of the stuff, eventually, I hope. But he's a preacher down here, and their church and his house and all that stuff all burnt the other night. And regardless of his being kind of deceived, I still hate it for him. I wouldn't wish that on nobody. And if you are of a mind to, pray for the man. I think they had insurance and all on the place, but the church building was like from the 1830s or something. I mean, it's been there a long time. So it was a pretty big loss for him. But just, and no loss of life or anything. They had some pets that died in there. One of their dogs and a cat or something. Which I hate that too, I mean, I've got animals. I got a cat that, is kind of bonded to me or whatever, and I love her. She's a sweet cat, but I wouldn't have any pets if it just kind of got ponded off on us. And now they just like they multiply like rabbits, and I mean faster than we can get them fixed. And now we got 3 puppies. Becca's, she was wanting to breed them anyway, to sell them or whatever. But, she's one of these people that's always scheming on how to make money or something. But, anyway, now we got them 3 little, about like that, puppies. And, but anyway, back to my friend there, Ed, and his wife, to pray for them, that that they'll get their stuff back and, get somewhere to live and all. But also pray for them to have their eyes opened, to come out of the delusion, because they in that same dispensational Protestant Christianity delusion, and hard for people to come out of it. Like I say, it was hard for me, and I'm still, but thanks to the Father, he has, I mean, if he can do it to me, change my way of thinking, he can do it for anybody. So I just pray for him that he will, and that they'll come around to the fact that everything that we've been told is a lie, a deception. But anyway, enough of that. I just kind of, like I say, I wanted to kind of let you know where I was at, why I hadn't been on here. I love you folks. I appreciate all of you, and I hope that everything's well with y'all, and that you'll continue to grow in the knowledge of the truth of, you know, that everything we have been told has been a lie. And just, I'm so thankful that I've been awakened to it. That when I look back, at my everything I've been taught all my life, and I began to see that all of it was a lie. Everything in school, everything, just all of it. And, I'm just thankful that the Father loved me enough and was merciful enough to, because I think He knew that in my heart I really wanted to know the truth. I have all my life. I really wanted to know the truth, but I just, didn't pursue it like I do now. I mean, now I truly pursue truth. As where back then, I wanted to know the truth, but did I really? I think I did, but not wholeheartedly. And when I began to really wholeheartedly want to know the truth, then He began to actually bring me to it. And I think that different people come to different truths at different times. It's not all at once. Because I think for some people it'd just be too big a shock to them. They just couldn't handle it. So we kind of get a little bit here and a little bit there, which has been my case. I've been kind of slowly over the last 25, 30 years getting little pieces here and there. And to now where I'm getting the really big stuff, the really mind-blowing stuff. And of course it's mentally, it wears on you. But anyhow, I'm going to call it an end here. I really do want to get these things to where it's shorter, and people will be more willing to watch them. But I love you. I pray for you. I hope you'll be blessed. Always remember to be good friends, and remember 2 Timothy 2:15. Study to make yourself approved, and may we all come to truth. And with that, I'm calling it a day, and I'll see you again on the next Shabbat if Yahweh is willing.